For the Browns, I like Josh Gordon. I think this is a solid matchup for him. I mean, you're going to play Josh Gordon no matter what in the home stretch, and you're playing him because that man is super serious fast, and I don't think there's a defensive back that can cover him at all. The Colts give up the fifth most fantasy points to running backs, which is why if Isaiah Crowell misses this weekend, fantasy managers of him will be extremely disappointed. But those with Terrence West, you're going to have to give him a go because that's how good this matchup is. Or certainly you should get Terrence West in as a flex. I don't think there'll be any other running back that they'll turn to as much as West, so he should be the guy. In terms of the defenses here, because there's so much of an uncertainty as to what this score is going to look like, whether it be a low-scoring game, medium-scoring game, high-scoring, I think that both defenses here are low-end options this week, and I would even dare say you should more than likely bench them and simply avoid them. But if you had to pick between two, go with the Colts. Colts win one on the road.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to the Detroit Lions. The Lions coming off a destruction of the Chicago Bears on Thanksgiving Day. They get a couple extra days to prepare for what? For Tampa Bay and Josh McCown. They're not gonna need it. I'm sorry. And as familiar as Lovie Smith might be with the personnel of the Detroit Lions, they also have a new coach this year, so you can't give me the Lovie angle on this. The Lions just have too much talent on that team. Their defense is too good, and they still have Stafford and Johnson, and there's just no way for me that I can possibly pick against Detroit in this game.
Yeah, the Lions should control this game from start to finish, and the Buccaneers should be playing catch up. I think last week when the Lions played the Bears there in Motown, the reality set in that this team actually dialed the clock back to what they looked like offensively last season. I think this is what we're going to see from the Lions for the remainder of the season. And that having been said, you're going to like Matt Stafford this week, Calvin Johnson, Golden Tate. Joique Bell at this point is a solid RB2 the rest of the way for the rest of the season. And the Lions defense is a top 5 start this week. If you have the Lions defense, they should not be on your bench. They should be in your active lineup if you want to win. For the Buccaneers, I got to be honest, it's tough to look at any of them as players that you may want to play in fantasy, with the exception of Mike Evans. The Lions are too good of a team defensively when it comes to the points allowed as well as the yards allowed. For example, they're number 1 against the rush, allowing an average of 66 yards per game. I'm not sure where they are in terms of touchdowns, but they've only allowed 6 on the season. That's not even 1 TD per game. Similarly, in terms of passing, they allow an average of 235 yards in 16 passing TDs to date, which means slightly better than 1 per game. They're bad numbers. So if you have any Buccaneers besides Mike Evans, forget about them and move on. Lions take one in the Motor City. Back to you, Keith.
You know, I made the mistake of telling you that you did a nice professional throwback last week, and now you're doing it every time.
I didn't do it every time.
Back to you, Keith. You're
all
like,
right, Keith.
You're doing your best Jimmy the Greek impersonation.
Well, you're just so serious, and I'm trying to lighten the mood up.
If you want me to lighten this place up, I will lighten this place up. It's a very dangerous ground you tread on, though. I'm just throwing that out there.
I know.
The Houston.
Well, hey,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, if you have some gem of wisdom, I don't want to talk over you.
It absolutely is no wisdom whatsoever. Move on.
The Houston Texans travel to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who had a nice win against the New York Giants. I know the Giants aren't anything to jump and shout about, but I used the term Monday, the resilient Jaguars on last Sunday at least. Getting down late, coming back, and getting the game-winning score. Good for them. Good for them. That's not going to happen this week. You know what else isn't going to happen this week? Ryan Fitzpatrick's not going to throw another 6 touchdown passes. This is going to be probably a lot closer game than everyone will have liked. At the end of the day, I just like the Texans better. It's that simple. I'm going to pick Houston on the road.
And I think you have to take Houston on the road. They're still playing for something. They're in the playoff hunt, where the Jaguars are pretty much done. the number one defensive start this week will be the Texans' defense and special teams unit. You make sure that they're active in fantasy football. For the Texans, Arian Foster, top 5 running back start this week. He's a must start. DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver 2-3, must start this week. Andre Johnson, not so much. He's a wide receiver 3, so consider him with your other options. You'll obviously know who your other choices are, and you will choose accordingly. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's a borderline QB1, but I mean, if you're in the playoffs, I don't know why you'd be looking at Ryan Fitzpatrick. Certainly, if your other option has a very difficult matchup, you can consider him, but hopefully that will not be the case unless your people are hurt and he's the guy. Then you can roll with him, and he's got a good chance. For the Jaguars, the only player I like is Denard Robinson against a defense giving up slightly better than 18 fantasy points allowed in standard scoring leagues. And Marquise Lee, I guess you could say he's a borderline wide receiver 3. I know some experts called for him as being a hot waiver wire pick. I'm not so sure that. And when you have 3 wide receivers and they're all pretty much getting sort of equal opportunity to produce, or equal opportunity producers, that necessarily makes them a top waiver wire pick, but so be it. In any case, I like the Texans this week, Keith, and they should win.
The Baltimore Ravens travel to the Miami Dolphins. And this is my, I'll categorize this pick as my over-emotional, overreacting pick of the week. Okay, the Baltimore Ravens are 7-5, so are the Miami Dolphins. The Ravens don't have that many wins against any really elite opponents. The Dolphins at least have a couple. I am picking the Ravens in this game simply because the Dolphins looked absolutely miserable against the New York Jets, and there's just no excuse for that. I'm sorry, there just isn't. If they got rolled for over 200 yards rushing by the Jets in the first half, the Dolphins defense did. The Ravens probably won't do that, but if they're going to give up that kind of rushing attack to a team that actually has a quarterback, they're not going to win. I know the Dolphins are at home, but the Ravens just have a little bit more in the tank, I think. I really want to believe in the Dolphins, but I'm not falling for it this week. I'm picking Baltimore.
Yeah, I see this game the complete opposite, Keith. I see this as a Dolphins win at home. Last week I thought was an anomaly with the way that the Jets handled the game against the Dolphins, going run heavy for most of the game, and the defense struggling. It won't happen with these Ravens. They're going to have a more balanced attack, and part of the reason is going to be because they don't have that kind of depth at running back. They only have one decent running back that they could possibly put forth. But the problem with the Ravens, as I see it, and why I think the Dolphins should win this, besides just generally being a good home team, is since their injuries in their secondary, they're just imploding. In the past 2 games, they have given up a total of 61 points. So it's an average of 30.5 points, and that's compared to the average on the season, which is 20.2. So clearly something is amiss with them defensively. And you've got a Dolphins team that, despite what happened last weekend, isn't even giving up 20 total points per game. So you sort of add all those factors in, and what comes out at the other end is a Dolphins win. For those reasons, I like Ryan Tannehill again. I think you should play him. I don't think you should let last week scare you. If he's your guy, he's your guy. I like Jarvis Landry possibly to get I think he'll get 1, possibly 2 touchdowns. Mike Wallace also makes for a good play. The Dolphins' defense is an option, just like the Ravens' defense is an option, even though they're not the very best ones. And for the Ravens, you go ahead and go with Justin Forsett. Torrey Smith, as long as he's healthy, he's had 1 TD in 6 of the last 9 games. Go Torrey. Otherwise, this should be a sound win for the Dolphins at home, and the Ravens are going to have to keep battling out the rest of their schedule to stay in the hunt in the AFC North.
By the way, a little side note here. I think Late Night Sports Radio has arrived because we actually got tweeted to by ESPN Fantasy Picks.
Oh, we did. Well, that's great.
Yeah, they want everybody to go there instead of here. No, thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah,
don't need you. Sorry, but we've arrived. The New York Jets travel to the Minnesota Vikings. The 2-10 New York Jets, who are Does the term rudderless ship apply here? Because they have somebody in charge, but nothing seems to change. The Vikings, on the other hand, are 5-7, and they are an optimistic 5-7. Losing a player like Adrian Peterson could have wrecked most franchises. But to their credit, they have pressed on. They have gone with the rookie quarterback now and Teddy Bridgewater. Not perfect, but there are signs of life in Minnesota. If you're a Vikings fan, you have to be very, very encouraged. The Jets, for everything that they do well on defense, they are equally, if not worse, on defense. On offense. Pardon my French. For whatever reason, they just don't get it done. They're traveling to Minnesota. I can't believe this. I am picking the Vikings this week.
Absolutely. Look, the Jets defensively, and this was a number that just sort of jumped out at me, 27 TDs allowed to date. And it's clearly they're giving up 2 passing TDs per game on average. And that includes what happened last week with the Dolphins. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The Vikings should do enough in this game. Their average in terms of scoring is actually better than the Jets, which is sort of a head-scratcher because you just think with some of the talent that they have on that team that the Jets could at least put some points on the board, even though their defense is struggling in one of the top 10 worst in the league. But I love the Vikings at home. I love their defense. This is a Jets team that's still at the very top in terms of fantasy points allowed. And I think they're still going with Geno Smith this week. I mean, any opportunity you have to start a defense against Geno Smith, potentially a Geno Smith that can implode right in front of you is an opportunity to start that defense. Other than that, the only other 2 real fantasy plays in this game are going to be Chris Ivory for the Jets. He proved what he can do when he runs the ball a lot, and I think if you're the Jets, you want to keep on a run-heavy offense. Maybe not as heavy as last week, but you still want it run-heavy just to minimize the mistakes of Geno Smith. And for the Vikings, Jerick McKinnon. I think he's a low RB2 or flex, and if I had him, I would try starting somebody else if at all possible before I play him, just because even though he's still an RB2 and a flex because of the number of touches he gets, he's sort of an underperforming one, and we really don't know what's going on with that Vikings backfield situation, so it is a situation to avoid. All that having been said, the Vikings fans should be very proud of this team with the way they're handling things and as they sort of make this stretch run because they're showing some signs of life for next season, something to build off of.
All right, we are halfway through. We are going to take a break to kind of refresh the old brains right here. We'll be back in about 3 minutes, folks. You're listening to the Fantasy Greeks Week 14 Fantasy Football Playoff starts and sits in 60 minutes on Late Night Sports Radio.